worries.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate it. I'm sorry the last item was a little bit long, but the neighborhood needed to be heard, and I thank you for your time. I realize you're mostly here for this item. Thank you very much. Mr. Clerk will take an item 17. We'll read it out. We'll let Mr.
Attorney Mullen. Yes. All right. Item number 17 is consideration of a resolution expressing the City Council's intent pursuant to Elections Code Section 10010 to initiate proceedings for establishing by-district elections for City Council members, approving a proposed timeline, adopting criteria for drawing district boundaries, and providing the public an opportunity for input on the composition of the districts.
As a mayor, I'll open this public hearing and come back to the council members and get your request.
Public and staff.
A lot of people, public and staff.
Me too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I've actually been looking at this since the city of Escondido was sued, and so I have, and also been following the city of Vista and the cities of and the city of Carlsbad and Oceanside Unified. So I have gotten a lot of input from the public, and of course read up on the material that was outstanding prior to our very well written city. Our staff report. Thank you.
This is the first I've heard of it. No, public and staff, lots of public and staff. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Kirk.
All material has been provided to the council.
Thank you much. And Mr. Mullen, how are you, sir?
Very well. Honorable Mayor, members of the council, and members of the public, tonight we're going to be giving you a presentation on the potential move to district elections. With me tonight, I want to introduce Karen McDonald, who is with Q2 Data and Research, LLC. She has been retained by my office and the city manager to assist us in this process, particularly should we proceed past tonight. She is an expert demographer, among many other talents. Her CV is attached to the staff report. You can see all of her professional accomplishments, but I would note a couple things in particular. She has worked with many cities transitioning from at-large districts to council district offices. In particular, the city of Chula Vista, the city of Escondido, and most recently the city of San Juan Capistrano, and each of those cities have rave reviews about her performance. So we're pleased that she's able to join us. We're going to divide this presentation. I'm going to talk about many of the legal issues and the process set up in the California state statute, and Karen will be picking up the presentation and discussing the criteria that are before you potentially to move towards districts, and the public outreach process that we are recommending that the City Council implement. So in a nutshell, these are the three things that we are recommending you approve in tonight's resolution. The first is simply to initiate this process to transition. It doesn't commit the city to approving specific districts, because those, of course, are not before you tonight. What is before you is whether to initiate the process. And that will, as you will see, bleed into Section 2, which is approving a schedule. Now, as you'll see when we go through this presentation, state law requires us to hold 4 public hearings prior to approving council districts. We're recommending that you do much more than that. We are recommending that in addition to these 4 public hearings, which would be scheduled in this room before the City Council, that you also conduct or approve 5 special community outreach meetings that would be led by Dr. McDonald and her team, and invited to members of the public. But we have these 5 proposed meetings in various locations, which we'll get to later on in this presentation, to assist the city and its residents in providing comment about the potential composition of district boundaries. And finally, we're asking you to adopt criteria to guide the staff, in particular Dr. McDonald, in putting the district together during her presentations with the public. So Why are we here? Well, I think in order to go through this presentation, we need to know the difference between what an at-large council district is and what a by-district system is. I think everybody generally knows it, but specifically, an at-large system is the system that we have and many other cities have had historically in California, where we have 4 council members elected at large and an at-large elected mayor. All of the registered voters of the city vote typically for 2 council members at each election, or at least have the opportunity to. A by-district system would require the candidate to live in the specific geographic district that would be established, and only those residents within the district would vote for the candidates running for that office. 27 cities had by-district elections before the California Voting Rights Act was adopted and implemented in 2003. There are now 60, and that number is counting, that have by-district elections. When I wrote this PowerPoint, I think we had more than about a dozen or so. There are a few more now that are considering the switch. But if you could see the trend, there have been 21 cities that had their first council district elections in 2016. So the trend is moving towards the district elections and away from the at-large districts. Oceanside is, according to the Department of Finance, the 26th largest city in the state of California. I looked at, well, what do the other 25 cities above us do? The top 10 populated cities all have council districts. 18 of these top 25 also have council districts, and many of those additional 7 are looking at moving to council districts at the present time. Within San Diego County, 6 of the top 8 populated cities have district elections. Those include the cities listed here: San Diego, Chula Vista, El Cajon, Escondido, San Marcos. Vista, I counted in there, is in the process. They haven't formally adopted it yet, but they've adopted their resolution of intent, and they've been holding their public hearings. Just to update the last line, Carlsbad received this same threat of litigation, which we'll talk about later. They will be considering the issue, as I understand it, later this month. The Oceanside Unified School District, I want to correct the note on this slide. They actually did consider the issue last Friday in a special meeting and voted to approve the resolution of intent that was put before them. So they are beginning the process of looking at the district elections as well. So the question is why? And you need to understand that there are 2 different statutory schemes at play here. The first is the Federal Voting Rights Act. And we'll get to the California Voting Rights Act, but we have these 2 parallel statutory obligations. Section 2 of the Federal Voting Rights Act prohibits what's known as vote dilution. And that's violated if a party can establish that members of a protected minority group have less opportunity than other members of the electorate to elect representatives of their choice. The Supreme Court has established a 3-part test to determine if an at-large system violates Section 2 of the Federal Voting Rights Act. The 3 factors are listed on this slide. The first is whether the minority group is sufficiently large and geographically compact to be a majority in a single-member district. So in other words, if we had in Oceanside, let's say hypothetically 4 council districts, would one of the districts be a minority-majority district? That would be one factor that would have to be established under the Federal Voting Rights Act. The second factor would be whether that minority group is politically cohesive. And what that means under the case law is whether the group tends to vote the same on candidate and ballot measure elections. And then the final factor is whether the majority votes sufficiently as a bloc effectively to defeat the minority's preferred candidate. These are the 3 factors the Supreme Court has established in a case called Jingles. All of these factors have to be proven to establish a Federal Voting Rights Act violation. And even if those 1 through 3 factors are proven, then the court, typically a federal district court, would consider what's known as the totality of the circumstances to determine if the minority group has less opportunity than other members of the electorate to participate in the election. These are some of the factors that a federal district court would look at under this totality of the circumstances test. We'd look at history of voting-related discrimination, evidence of minority candidate success, and as you know, there has been evidence of minority candidate success in Oceanside. There is the presence of suspect voting practices that may dilute the minority vote. And one example of that would be if you have a numbered system where a candidate would run for a particular council office but wouldn't have to live in that district and require a majority approval, that could have a tendency to result in voter delusion. The other factors are listed here that a court could look at under the totality of the circumstances test. So litigants had difficulty establishing all of these factors in California cases. All the 1 through 3 factors in the Jingles test I discussed, as well as the totality of the circumstances test. And what ended up happening was the enactment of the California Voting Rights Act. That was adopted in 2002, made effective in 2003, and it requires a different standard. So as you could see from the slide, an at-large method of election may not be imposed or applied in a manner that impairs the ability of a protected class to elect candidates of its choice or its ability to influence the outcome of an election. So I highlighted that language, or its ability to influence the outcome, because that is not a standard under the Federal Voting Rights Act. That's unique to the California Voting Rights Act. So it's very significant that a plaintiff under the CVRA does not have to prove the first factor of the Jingles test I discussed before. They do not have to show that a minority group could constitute a minority district. That's not a factor under the CVRA. A candidate or a plaintiff may not even have to show that a preferred candidate lost an election. There's no proof of a discriminatory intent required on the part of the city. Really, plaintiffs would prevail if they can prove what's known as racially polarized voting. And racially polarized voting under the section 14026E means voting in which there's a difference in the choice of candidates or other electoral choices. That would mean ballot measures, among other things, that are preferred by voters in a protected class, and in the choice of candidates and other electoral choices that are preferred by voters and the rest of the electorate. So as you can see from the language, compare this with what we talked about in the Federal Voting Rights Act, the very stringent Jingles test and the totality of the circumstances standards that have to be met. This is the standard that has to be met under the California Voting Rights Act. So it's a much lower burden of proof for the plaintiffs to establish. Case law and the statute makes it clear that CVRA, and this CVRA only applies to at-large systems. It's specifically targeted at the at-large systems. So it prevents minority voters from electing candidates, but also prohibits at-large systems that impair the ability of minority candidates to influence. So that influence standard is significantly broader than what is provided in the Federal Voting Rights Act. These are some of the factors that a court would consider in determining whether racially polarized voting exists. Of course, the success rate of candidates would be relevant, but it is not the only factor. The outcome of ballot measures supported or opposed by a member of a protected class, by a minority group, would be probative as well. And the other factors that are listed on this slide would be examined by a court as well. So these are some of the same factors that would be looked at in the totality of the circumstances test under the federal law, but they're not necessarily required. One doesn't have to prove all these things. All that really needs to be proven is this standard under 14026E, which is the racially polarized voting standard. So I want to kind of fast forward and talk about the threat of litigation that was received by the city. It's the same threat, as you know, that many of the surrounding cities have received in the past, that Carlsbad's received, that San Marcos and Vista received. It is pretty much a boilerplate letter, but we received that on March 27, 2017, alleging that racially polarized voting exists due to an at-large council election system. Under the law, we have 45 days to respond to this threat. What that means is that no lawsuit can be filed during that 45-day period. The plaintiff, and a specific plaintiff has not yet been identified, but a plaintiff would not be able to file a complaint in court under the CVRA during this period. And what happens now if the resolution of intent is adopted, then, of course, as I said before, it doesn't mean we automatically have districts. We would have a process set up to start discussing that. But then if the resolution is adopted, the plaintiffs would be locked out of court for an additional 90 days. So all told, we could have a 135-day period where the plaintiffs would not be able to resort to court. So the question is, why would we consider this process now? As we've talked about, and Karin is going to expand upon as well, there is a very low burden of proof under the CVRA cases as compared to the Federal Voting Rights Act case. Not a single city has ever prevailed in a CVRA case. No special district has prevailed on the merits in such a case. So we would be the first city, if we elect to litigate, to attempt to win, or if we were to win, we would be the first, I should say. And as we've seen from the chart in the first slide, district elections are beginning to become the norm. As we've talked about, the 6 of the 8 top populated cities in the county now have district elections. So it's a very low burden of proof. Secondarily, the attorney's fees that could accompany these cases is very high. I've discussed in the staff report, and it's attached, I believe, as Exhibit 2, a list of payouts that cities have been forced to make in unsuccessful litigation cases under the CVRA. There's 2 cases that are the most important. One involves the city of Modesto, where Modesto argued that on its face that the Voting Rights Act violated the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution, and the court rejected that argument. The appellate court affirmed the lower court, and Modesto paid the plaintiff's attorneys $4.5 million in fees, and that does not count the fees that they paid their own lawyers to litigate, as well as their expert costs. The second case was a case involving the city of Palmdale. Palmdale had argued, and many charter cities had maintained, that the CVRA did not apply to charter cities because our own municipal elections are a municipal affair, or so many charter cities felt. The Palmdale court decided otherwise. CVRA now, in a published opinion, does apply to charter cities. Palmdale paid $3 million in attorney's fees in that case. So all told, since 2006, I believe the list I put together shows about $15 million in payments by cities. The third reason to consider this now is because we could begin the process without having to resort to litigation. State law was amended effective January 1 of this year to provide this 135-day safe harbor when no litigation can be filed. In the past, only smaller cities had the authority. Those cities that were under 100,000 in population had the ability to go through this process and have the council potentially approve council districts through an ordinance. So we've talked a little bit about fees already, but what I'm referring to in this bullet point 4 is really the internal cost, because there would be definitely internal costs incurred. I know in the materials that Vista provided, they estimated the cost would be no less than $500,000 to just defend the matter, whether it was successful or not. I tend to think that would be a little bit higher, but I think that that provides a ballpark. 5, and I think is a very important point, if we were to adopt the resolution and begin the process, we have ultimate control over it. This would not be a situation where a court could be ordering us, and I've quoted the language here on bullet point number 5, that if the plaintiffs prevail, the court shall implement appropriate remedies, including the imposition of district-based elections tailored to remedy the violation. So that could have the potential to remove the city council's control ultimately over, and the public's control over, the composition of the districts. Finally, moving towards this process could avoid disruption in future elections. One of the remedies the court could issue is an injunction to prevent certification of election results, and that has happened in past cases, so that is a real remedy that we would have to consider. I mentioned before, this government code section allows the council to adopt the ordinance to create by-district elections. And the process now required under state law is that we would have to have 4 total public hearings before the city council. The resolution before you suggests the dates of today being the first date for receiving public input, the second on May 17th. Those public hearings have to be held before any map is drawn. We have to hold 2 additional public hearings no more than 45 days apart after a map is drawn and made public. And we'd have to make that map public a week before the 3rd public hearing. So we're looking at June 14th to make the map public, June 21st for the 3rd hearing, July 25th for the 4th, and that July 25th would be a special meeting that you would call tonight in the resolution. Finally, we would propose that the second reading be considered at a special meeting for August 1st, and the resolution before you also calls that special meeting for August 1st. I just want to end on this slide, and then I'll turn it over to Karen. There's 4 public hearings we're recommending, but these are additional community outreach meetings. These are not council meetings. These are meetings with the public and our demographer, really to listen to the public and to begin the drawing process. And should you adopt the resolution, we would recommend these 5 community outreach meetings beginning May 13th, culminating on May 30th. Karen will mention that we have a proposed website. If you adopt the resolution, that would go up tomorrow, and all of these would be placed on the city's website, and all of the public process we're going through would be summarized there. So at this point, I'm prepared to turn it over to Karen, and she will continue on discussing the criteria we'd be using, as well as some additional comments about process.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, members of the public. Thank you very much for inviting me to help out with this presentation. I will start by going through the proposed districting criteria that the city attorney has put together, and then I'll go through it one by one in a little more detail and explain them. I'll also go through the proposed process. So the districting criteria that we will be using, should you approve going forward with this project, are actually very similar to the districting criteria that you will find in other similar projects, redistricting or districting alike. And you'll see in a second why. I'll read them really quickly. Each district should contain nearly the same number of people. Boundaries shall be drawn in a manner that complies with the United States Constitution and the Federal Voting Rights Act. FVRA stands for Federal Voting Rights Act. Council districts shall consist of contiguous territory in as compact form as practicable. Districts shall follow visible features and boundaries where possible. Council districts shall respect communities of interest as much as practicable. Communities of interest generally refers to a contiguous population which shares common social and economic interests that should be included within a single district for purposes of fair and effective representation. And finally, disregard the location of incumbents and candidates as well as the interests of political parties. So let's go through these one at a time. Criteria 1 and 2, and I know there's 3 things up there, but I can't actually count. Equal population, the Constitution, and the Federal Voting Rights Act. The Constitution is in there because that is really where we get these criteria. So first, we are looking at the 14th Amendment, and this is something that the city attorney has also alluded to. This is the Equal Protection Clause. It's interpreted to require reasonably equal district populations. And you may have heard in the past, one person, one vote. That's basically where we get that concept. Also, it prohibits intentional discrimination because it is a violation of equal protection, i.e., the jurisdiction is treating residents differently because of race and thus not according them equal protection under the law. And then there is the 15th Amendment, which bans racial discrimination in voting. So let's talk about equal population. What is the ideal population per district? Did I just skip one? Let me see. No. Okay. What is the ideal population per district? So when we're talking about ideal population, this is when we're starting to draw districts, this is what we're shooting for, basically. This is what we'd like to end up at. So the ideal population for each type of district is you take the total population that was reported by the census, you divide it by the number of districts that you're going to draw, and that's how you get your ideal population. So in Oceanside, the total population from the 2010 census was 167,000 and 86 people. And you may wonder, why are we talking about the 2010 census? Because that was a really long time ago. And the reason for that is that that is actually the only count of the population that we have. That's the only time every 10 years that somebody actually has everybody fill out a form and we're counting the population. Everything that comes thereafter is an estimate. So that is what the law has told us we need to stick to, is the 2010 census. I have a tiny little caveat on this, and that is that that number may change a tiny little bit by a few people, and I'll go into more detail in the community meetings should we go forward with this project, because we just found out that the Oceanside city boundaries may not actually be accurately reflected in the census data. So we're working with that right now, so there may be a tiny little bit, but not much, of a change in that population. So, sticking with that 167,086 people, if you divide it by 4, you end up with 41,771.5, actually, people per district, and that's roughly what we'd like to get. So how equal is equal, though? We're talking equal population. Do we really have to be that strict? Well, there's different standards for different jurisdictions, and if you're looking at congressional districts nationwide, you'll see that they only vary by like 1 or 2, maybe 5 people. And that is because the courts have held congressional districts to what they call strict scrutiny. That means there is not much playing around. You don't have a lot of flexibility there. You have to really stick to that number that you get when you divide, the total population by the number of districts. But with lower level districts, you actually have more flexibility, and that's really a good thing, because when we talk about these other criteria, you're always trying to draw the best districts that you can. So if possible, you don't want to split neighborhoods if neighborhoods want to stick together, for example, or you want to just respect communities of interest. So if you have this strict population equality, that can become really difficult. So what the law says is that districts must be reasonably equal. So that means you have a little bit of wiggle room there, and in general, we can use up to plus minus 5% from the mean to basically play around with our district populations and see that we can also meet some of the other criteria a little better. So that means that we have about 2,089 people wiggle room from that 41,771. But of course, in the end, everybody has to be assigned to a district. So, not everybody can be like under. Some people will be over that ideal population. I'm going to go through this really quickly because the city attorney has already talked about this, but it is in our redistricting criteria. So the Federal Voting Rights Act, in particular Section 2, is a very important law. And we don't just have it in the criteria, just because the city attorney came up with it. It actually applies to all jurisdictions nationwide. Every jurisdiction that conducts an election actually is subject to Federal Voting Rights Act Section 2. And again, it prohibits the denial or abridgment of voting rights on the basis of race or language minority status. And just so everybody knows, in case it comes in handy at some point, what's defined as a language minority is actually Asian, Native American, Alaskan Native, or Spanish heritage. It does not apply to other language groups. So, French people, sorry, not happening. It prohibits practices that have the purpose or effect of discriminating on the basis of race or language minority status. So, Federal Voting Rights Act and districting, I think the city attorney has already gone through this in a lot of detail. Basically, the deal is here vote dilution. So electoral systems can limit the ability to elect a candidate of choice. That's how people talk about this. By a protected class of voters, again, language minorities or people that are covered under the race criterion, so again, not our French people, in various ways. So for example, at-large election systems can make it impossible for even a large minority group to elect a candidate of choice when the majority votes against them. Another example is that single-member districts can be drawn in ways that minimize voters' ability to elect a candidate of choice. And systems that limit that ability are said to dilute minority voting strength. Race and districting. So this gets interesting because we've talked about race and ethnicity and language minority status a lot so far, but actually once it comes to drawing district lines, you're actually not talking about race all that much because race cannot be the predominant criterion in line drawing. That means you're not basically looking at your jurisdiction and you're looking at where everybody lives by race and ethnicity, and then you draw your districts based on that. You do not get to do that. The Supreme Court has limited the role that race can play in districting pretty significantly, and there was this whole series of cases, Shaw versus Reno and so forth, pretty interesting to read. If anybody wants to read up on it, come talk to me and I will tell you where to find it. So race should not subjugate traditional districting principles. What does that mean? Is you have to look at traditional districting principles and not just at race. So in these cases, district appearance, what the district actually looks like when you're done drawing it, has been very important in some of those cases. And if I had more time, I would have brought you all some maps, because there's some really great ones, and this is where this famous term gerrymandering comes in. Because, you know, people look at it and it looks really strange, and that's basically how the courts are looking at it too. If it looks funny, well, there may be something happening there. So let's talk about traditional districting criteria. And again, these are not things that were just cooked up here. These are things that have been used over and over again in all districtings and redistrictings nationwide. Examples include compactness, contiguity, and our proposed criteria include that language, and it says the council districts shall consist of contiguous territory in as compact form as practicable. So you see these traditional redistricting or districting criteria reflected in that language. The next one is communities of interest, and I can't tell a lie, that is my favorite criterion ever. I can talk about it for hours, and I won't tonight. So the language here says council districts shall respect communities of interest as much as practicable. We'll go through this in a second. So we have criterion number 3, which is compactness. It's one of the geographic criteria, and when you're districting, you're talking about geography a lot. So you'll really get used to this. You're looking at things that are called units of analysis, census blocks, and the likes. So it addresses the geography of the district, and there are a lot of different ways to measure this. And in fact, it's one of the most popular topics at all these statistics conferences that are held close to redistricting, because you have all these young academics coming up and saying, I have just figured out a really great new way to measure compactness. And the last time I checked, there were probably thousands of different measures that you can use to measure this. However, the court says, well, compactness is important because it guards against all types of gerrymandering. So there's that term again, right? It's basically, it shouldn't look funny. It should be in a compact shape. Drastic departures from compactness are a signal that something may be amiss. So that means if it looks funny, then somebody may take a second look at it. Most common complaints about compactness come from appearances, i.e. does a district look funny? And the justices on the Supreme Court, they have actually said, well, you know, we know there are a lot of different measures about compactness, but we just use the eyeball approach. So appearances matter. So if it looks funny, we'll just take another look, and then you guys have some explaining to do. The next criterion is contiguity, and that's pretty straightforward, and it's also a geographic criterion. The definition is a contiguous district is one in which all parts are connected to each other. So basically, you can't have one piece of your district in the south of the city and another piece in the north of the city, and it's not connected in any way. A district in which one may travel from one location to any other location without crossing the district boundary. So finally, criterion 5, my favorite one, communities of interest. The language says that council districts shall respect communities of interest as much as practicable, and communities of interest generally refers to a contiguous, so in one piece, population which shares common social and economic interests. So interestingly enough, while you find communities of interest in pretty much every document that I have ever seen that gives guidance to how districts are supposed to be drawn, there really are no data sets available to define communities of interest. So who defines a community of interest? You all do. So I'm really hoping that everybody's going to come out to all these meetings and help us to define communities of interest and help us find out what's going on in the city and how good districts can be drawn. And of course, if the council votes to approve this, this recommendation. So communities of interest, KOI, are defined by those familiar with the community. The law does not limit the kinds of interests that may bind a community. So this, of course, has been litigated. Everything in redistricting and districting has pretty much been litigated. It's up to those who live in or work with communities to identify and establish the interests that unite it. And the interests do not need to be limited to the current situation. So it's not just all about what's going on right now, but also maybe are people working towards something. And I will explain more as we go forward with this process on how to do that. The city will definitely need your input on this particular criterion. So here are some examples really quickly. Under economic interests, a current situation could be there is perhaps common employment in a particular area, or there is particular economic opportunities, or maybe a lack of opportunities in a particular area. And the goals may be to expand those opportunities, some development. We just heard a lot about a particular development, but I'm sure there's others. Bringing in businesses or jobs, sometimes redevelopment, things like that. And then social interests could be schools, culture, a shared culture, transportation issues. Sometimes, there is perhaps a bus hub or some sort of transportation hub that is planned that people are really engaged with. Parks, oftentimes people organize around parks and open space. And goals could be to improve, for example, recreational opportunities or public safety, preserving historic resources, and so forth. So basically, it's up to you to let us know what it is that you organize around and basically what you would need representation on. So how do you document a community of interest? You basically just think about the following questions. What bounds your community? Outline what defines a community of interest, like what's your mission, what's your commonality, and what's different outside of the boundaries of your community of interest. So basically, why are people across the street or across this main thoroughfare different? Is there perhaps a different housing stock or things like that? And then also, we would need to know where your community is located in the city. So what we would need is just give us the boundaries, draw a map. I have received maps from members of the public on anything, including a napkin. We'll take it, we will figure it out, and once we know where you're located, we can basically take that all into consideration. And finally, ignore politics. So we are to disregard where incumbents and candidates live. So if this process goes forward and you come to the meeting and you know where somebody lives, please don't tell us. Thank you. And also, we're supposed to disregard political parties. And the reason for that is that it prohibits intentional benefit or harm. How do you participate? So Mr. Mullen has shown us the dates of the community meetings that we're planning. There's, of course, also the city council hearings. And we've basically proposed a process that is really designed for maximum transparency and community participation. Nothing will happen behind closed doors. Everything will happen in public, and that includes drawing maps, okay? So the only thing that we may not do in public is sometimes checking to make sure that we didn't forget to assign a census block or something like that, or maybe we will make the map that everybody has approved so that it can go onto the website, but there will be no line changes or anything like that. So there are many, many ways to participate. In person, we have 4 hearings, 5 community meetings. We looked at the city, we found locations throughout the city. They're accessible, there will be translation services available. You can, if you don't want to come to a meeting or those dates don't work, you can reach us via email. The email is district.elections@ci.oceanside.ca.us. We have a website that will go live if this project is approved. So it is basically the Oceanside website under elections /districtelections.asp. You can reach us via mail, City Clerk, 300 North Coast Highway, Oceanside, 92054. And we're basically available to you all whenever you have time to get in touch with us. So finally, why should you participate? Well, if we go forward, you should participate because you want to make sure that we know about your community of interest, because we would really, really hate it if we don't know that your community exists and then accidentally we put a line through it and you end up in 2 different districts. So that is not an intention, so please just let us know where your communities are. You should also participate to give your community a voice and make sure it has equal access to the political process. You can encourage citizens to register, to vote, to remain politically engaged. That really have been effects of a districting process, and really to help shape a districting plan that provides communities in Oceanside a meaningful opportunity to elect candidates who represent your interests on issues that are important to your lives. So that is the end of this presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. Appreciate it.
I know this is an important issue to all of you in the audience, no matter what side you're on. We have quite a few speakers. How many?
We have 35 speaker slips so far.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't want to repeat something, don't get up and talk. If in fact you want to say something, you have the right to do it. The 35 speakers, a minute, unless you want a minute each.
1 minute each?
Yeah, 35, we got a lot of time to go. But anyhow, try 1 minute. How about 3? We'll try 2. It'll be here all night. Thank you very much.
2 minutes? Okay. So it appears that we have 2 minutes. We have 35 speakers, so the way it's going to work, I'll call you up 4 at a time. You can line up at both podiums. Just if it's your first time, the way it works is the green light will mean it's your time to speak. The yellow light comes on when you have 1 minute left, and the red light comes on when your time has expired. So that's basically it. And just a quick reminder, we do have a decorum policy in the council, but that's just, you guys are doing a great job, and I really appreciate how patient you've been all night to get to this point. So thank you for that. And we'll move forward with our first 4 speakers. Our first 4 speakers are Lori, Francisco Gairon, Michael Richardson, and Barbara Hazlitt. And I do apologize for any incorrect pronunciations.
2 podiums and go to one of the other, okay?
Hello, council members. Thank you for giving me this opportunity
You
to
can
speak.
wait the other podium while somebody's speaking to make it go faster. Thank you. Go
I
ahead.
hope my minutes haven't started
No,
yet.
I stopped it. Yeah.
Okay. I've been a resident and citizen of the city of Oceanside for 28 years. I'm completely against the districting. I don't want one member of the city council representing me. I want the entire city council representing me. If you divide your citizens into districts, then you divide the city and you divide its citizens. All of you should represent all of us. You should not let some lawyer from outside our city dictate how you serve us. Do we care about how other cities run their elections? We should care about what Oceanside does. Now, in the comments that were made, between the lawyer and the gal, I don't remember your name, I apologize, the city attorney and the gal that just gave us the presentation, things were said like in non-district elections, minorities are kept from voting. Well, I'm a minority. I am a Hispanic. I'm raised in a Hispanic household. My grandma's last name is Sanchez. My maiden name is Salazar. I've never been kept from voting. I voted in every election since I was 18 years old. being a minority does not exclude you from voting in an election. Now, then also it was said minorities are kept from electing their chosen candidate. Well, guess what? I have not been able to elect my chosen candidate many times, whether it's presidential, governorship, local city council. I just don't understand this. Does that mean that my voting rights are being infringed upon because I am a minority and I have not elected, a candidate hasn't been elected that I have voted for? No, it doesn't. You're trying to keep ourselves separate from each other, not a whole city of Oceanside. We are trying to divide our city. This is an attempt at money grabbing or forcing the city to its knees, which is exactly what's happening. We all should participate. She had said we should all have equal access to the political process. Well, we do if we participate and we're citizens of the United States of America. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Michael Richardson. I want to use part of my time to ask this nice lady a question that came up when I was listening to her. I want to know, what if the community of interest is your whole city? You can answer later, please. My mom and her parents and four sisters, rather, came to Oceanside when she was 8 years old, which was 90 years ago. She still lives in the same house that I grew up in. She's lived there 68 years on Cassidy Street. My dad's family came a little later on, about the same time. I was born up the street, about 6 blocks up the street, 76 years ago. My dad and his brothers, under the name Richardson Brothers Builders, built many of the buildings in downtown that were built between 40s, 50s, and 60s. My Uncle Howard was mayor from 1956 to 60, so we've always taken intense interest in the community. My cousin Doug Avis was a councilman in the 70s. I talked to Doug about this issue. He said he couldn't take a position on it, but that he remembered they thought about it, considered it back in the 70s, and decided it was a bad idea. It's still a bad idea. His sister, Kathy Avis Green, sent a letter to you, which I think expresses his feelings. The letter that you received is a hateful, total lie about our city. When my parents came here, there were 2,500 people. Today, there are 167,000, and they came here because it's a welcoming, friendly, inclusive community. We are not racially charged. We are not a divisive city. If you have to do something, put this to a vote of the public. Let us decide. What is the hurry? It's worked for 120 years the way it is. What is the hurry? Thank you.
If I may, ladies and gentlemen, I know you're really enthusiastic and applauding. That's fine. Just hold it to minimal because it makes us go along. Thank you.
You want me to hold it over here?
Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Barbara Hazlett. I live at 4540 Cordova Way, Oceanside. Good evening, Mayor Wood, City Council, and Oceanside residents. I'm here to express my opposition to the districting of Oceanside for voting for City Council. In the lawsuit presented by Mr. Schenkman of Malibu, he claims that the Latino population is not being represented on the City Council. The facts are that there has been a Hispanic or Latino City Council member for the last 20 years. Esther Sanchez has represented Oceanside for the last 16 years and was just reelected with the most votes. At one time, there were Rocky Chavez and Esther Sanchez on the board, and before that there was Lucy Sanchez, who was on the City Council. I did not feel that I, as a non-Hispanic, was not represented. I know they wanted the best for Oceanside. About 35% of the population identifies itself as Hispanic. The 65% of non-Hispanics should be able to vote for all 4 city councilmen, and we should be one Oceanside. Thank you.
My name is Francisca Galvan. I want to ask you, all of them, let people free. Let people free. My whole family lives in Mexico. I'm the only one in the United States. What this person did, or these people did, they are talking about Mexico. You go to Tijuana, this is what they did. They put the people in this corral, and if they want to talk, if they want to vote for somebody else, they burn their house, they intimidate them. Either they vote for the PRI or they vote for the PRI. They intimidate them with the job, you name it. My stomach hurts just to listen to them. I'm an American citizen. I'm Mexican descent. Do not call me minority. You insult me because a minority belongs to the Democratic Party. Do not call me Mexican American because when I was Mexican, I was 100% Mexican, and now I'm American, I'm 100% American. And please do not insult me because everything is money. You've seen these people. They will be fighting with the Muslims. Be aware of it. They are using you. I can picture this is for the future because they're pushing so many Muslims over here, Chicanos, Latinos over here fighting. Thank you very much. Yeah. Please listen.
Our next 4 speakers are Sean C., I believe it's Colgan, Kathy Hamilton, Richard Hamilton, and Deborah. No last name for Deborah, though, so please begin.
Thank you. While people are waiting, you can take one of the other podiums. You're right, whatever you want. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sean Colgan. I live in Temple Heights area. For the reasons that Barbara mentioned, we can beat this guy as a matter of fact. The conditions he needs to win his lawsuit simply don't exist. We can beat him. And we can make him pay our expenses. And the advantage of doing that is right now he writes a letter, a city rolls over and plays dead. And he'll just keep going and going unless someone puts a stop to him. Defeat him once, and we can give hope to all the other cities that are on his targeted by this guy. And it's true that you're Oceanside City Council, but you took an oath to the Constitution of the Republic. What happens in other places matters to you, matters to me, matters to us. Defeat this guy. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kathy Hamilton, and basically I would like to ditto what has gone on before. I will not take my full 2 minutes, but I do think we have to stand up to a bully, and I love this town, and I love the homogeneous feel that it has, and I don't want to see it divided. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Deborah Ramirez. I am of Hispanic descent, and based on what I just heard, there is a division. We have been divided. The second thing I want to say is for the first time, I have been voting since I have been 18 years of age in this country. I'm a native-born citizen. I've grown to come to learn to love America, not just by being a citizen, but knowing its heritage, knowing why we exist, why we're here, why we vote. We vote because you, who are all sitting there, we vote for you to represent us as a people. So I don't see race. The only race I see is the human race. We are a people. And I can say for the first time based on hearing what I just heard, I feel like I do not have the freedom to vote. You now, based on what you have just said and what your intentions are to do, is to remove that from me as an American citizen who has been here all my life and love what we are, what we do, what you represent for us. We voted for you.
Is Richard Hamilton here? Okay. Oh, did you want to? Okay, no problem. Thank you so much. Our next four speakers are Patty Sigorio. I'm sorry. Oh, Patty Sigmund, Linda Gonzalez, Judy Weiss, and Linda Sills.
Hoorah.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Wood and City Council members. My name is Patty Sigmund, and I'm a spokeswoman for the Oceanside Citizens Coalition. Our local coalition here in Oceanside is made up of many large constitutional and pro-rule of law groups. We are here today to strongly urge that our City Council reject the lies and the bullying from Malibu attorney Kevin Schenkman and his clients. The Southwestern Voter Registration Education Project, a Latino special interest group based in Texas. We truly believe this is a left-wing power play. We, the citizens and voters of Oceanside, strongly reject the racist, bullying tactics of Kevin Schenkman and his Latino activist clients, and their attempt to steal political power from the Black, Asian, Samoan, and white voters in our city, and to dilute our votes by 75% by trying to restrict us to only one vote for one district council member as opposed to all 4 council members. And we have so successfully done so in the past. Mr. Schenkman's proposed race-based voting scheme would divide our harmonious, multicultural city into racial voting districts and take us back to the 1950s style of racial segregation practice. We, the citizens, will not allow our fine city to become divided along racial lines again. I don't know about you, but I'm a Marine, and my husband is a Marine, and we took an oath. And I don't know if you know that oath, but we do, to protect our country from foreign and domestic enemies. This is a shakedown by attorneys, and we are not going to surrender ever to extortion. We urge the City Council tonight to reject the voting district proposal.
Thank you for the privilege of speaking to you briefly about voting, which means a lot to me. I am an Oceanside resident and voter who greatly prefers at-large voting to district-only voting. Don't all of you elected officials want to know you were voted in by all of Oceanside instead of just one area of voters? Don't you want people of all races and ethnicities to be allowed to vote for all candidates instead of just one? Wouldn't you take more pride in knowing you were chosen by the whole city and represent all of us? Our record from many years back through now proves that these outsiders are mistaken. Many city councils have caved in without a fight. Don't be bullied into dividing our city. Let's be victorious and stand united.
Good evening. My name is Linda Gonzalez, and I'm here for a very personal reason. I was named in the letter that the attorney sent, and just for the public record, I want to reflect my position that I oppose districting. I feel like I was treated very fairly by the citizens of Oceanside, and I think two great Americans got elected. I'm sorry I came in third, but I think that we fought a good race, and we did a good job, and people voted, and that was a good thing. I want you to consider that the needs of the city are much more important than race baiting. Right now, we're just being baited into doing something that's not healthy for our city. We don't have a history of not practicing using good judgment and diversity. We have a history of electing diverse city councils. We have a history of having a voice for all the people in our community. Let's not give that up so easily that we just stand by and let someone from Santa Monica decide what's good for Oceanside. It's more than just a Wiener Schnitzel and a Starbucks decision. It's a decision about the diversity of our city. So I hope you will consider that united we stand, but divided we do fall. Thank you.
Go, girl. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. My name is Linda Sills, and I do live in Oceanside. I was really shocked to see the 14th and 15th Amendments. I think you need a history lesson. Those are post-slavery issues. This issue of district voting and the threatening letters sent to you by Schenkman and Hughes, these people were hired by a group in Texas, which apparently was imported from Mexico, and they may have ties to La Raza, which, by the way, is a communist organization. This type of letter is extortion, and these people should be prosecuted for it. This race-based voting idea contributes to balkanization. Webster defines it as to break up as a region into smaller and often hostile units. This concept leads to disenfranchisement. Another definition, to deprive a franchise of a legal right, to deprive of the right to vote. I think it is time to bring back HUAC. That's the House of Un-American Activities Committee. We could have 1,000 people here objecting to this, and unfortunately some would cave and do whatever they want. California is now a confederacy, which is a combination of persons coalescing for unlawful purposes. I plan to vote with my feet, and real soon, and move out of this failed state before it becomes Venezuela.
Our next four speakers are Steve Hasty, Michael Miller, Amy Sutton, and Stephen Pearson.
Who's the first one?
Steve Hasty is the first speaker.
Do we get to have our piece projected?
Yeah.
Mayor, Councilman, it's a pleasure to speak to you, but not under these conditions. I find it very ironic that earlier tonight, Councilman Sanchez mentioned the word disenfranchisement on a different issue, because that's exactly why I'm standing here. I currently have 4 opportunities to vote for who sits in these seats. With districting, that's going to be taken down to only 1 opportunity to vote who sits in these seats. To me, that's a 75% reduction in my voter influence. That is voter disenfranchisement. You mentioned earlier tonight about community interest. I fear what would happen if you shove people into districts of community interest. I bring up the mobile homeowners who recently had an issue about rent control. If they were pushed into one district, they would only have 1 councilman speaking for them if this issue ever comes up again. The elderly in general. How about the homeless? What if the decision is to put all the homeless in one district? Because we don't want that in my backyard. And that's what I fear districting could do. City council is the lowest form of government in our lives, and we should have the maximum voting influence on who those people are. We understand your fear of a lawsuit, but the explanation we keep getting is, it's gonna happen. You can't stop it. Just relax and let it happen. And that reminds me of the words of a rapist who would say to his victim, it's gonna happen. You can't fight it. Just relax and let it happen. And that's how I feel, that my voting rights will be raped away from me at a rate of 75%. I want to encourage you, Jack Feller, to have the courage to vote no on this. Jerry Kern, to vote no on this. I encourage you, Mayor Wood, to vote no on this. Esther, You are living proof with your claim that you've gotten the most votes in all your elections, that districting doesn't affect us, that this letter is completely false. For you to vote for districting would encourage identity politics and encourage racism within our city. I don't want to see that. That big map behind you shows a beautiful representation of our city. Please don't let our city be carved up. We pray for you, we pray for our city, and we ask that you please side with the citizens and not fall to the fear of a lawsuit. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm 41 years old. I was born in this city, as many people who are natives are, back when Tri-City was a hospital and not a medical center. I also remember that neighborhood, Tri-City. They called it the Biddy for a reason, because people wore red in that neighborhood. That was blood territory. You could go up to Mesa, you could go over to Pesole, you could go into DVC, D Valley Crips. That was a divided city. History is going to repeat itself by this action and this Malibu attorney pushing buttons that he has no business pushing. So here we're sitting today trying to fight to keep away what ultimately, again, came was directives from the Los Angeles area back in the early 90s when there was a peace treaty between the Bloods and the Crips. Here we sit today talking about dividing something that 25 years ago we got rid of. We had a peace treaty. Seems like we're doing pretty good now. Why are we going to turn back the clock? Thank you very much.
My name is Steve Pearson. I've lived in Oceanside for 5 years, not very long, but the division that I see coming here is an ongoing effort that I've seen happen in the last 10, 15 years. I've watched it happen through a lot of things in my life, of division between different people, different races. I wasn't brought up that way. I see everybody the same. It just depends on if you're a good person or if you're a bad person. So I think I've met some of you at different events, Harbor Days and other ones, and congratulated you on doing a good job. I think you can do a good job the way you are right now. Thank you.
Is Amy Sutton still here? Amy Sutton? Okay, no problem. We'll move to our next four speakers: Jeff Schwilk, Susan Custer, Joan Paro, and Donna McGinty.
Good evening.
Good evening, Council. It's amazing that we're even talking about this issue. I think you've heard all the speakers make all the great points. We listened to 2 long presentations here telling us why we need to adopt this. This is the three-page letter from Schenkman. It says quite clearly in English, we are a racist city and we're in violation of the law. Anybody up in here think we're racist? Anybody up in here think we're in violation of the law? I didn't think so. It's really that simple, guys. This is a fake letter. We are not in violation of any laws. We are not racist. Esther Sanchez, Rocky Chavez, Terry Johnson, Lucy Chavez are living proof of that. We all know it in our hearts. Vote the right way. We elected you to represent us, and you hearing us today, all of us, and we represent thousands who can't be here tonight, who feel the same way we do. We are not going to play this race-based politics game in our city. We are standing strong, united, and we will not tolerate this. So we elected you to represent us. If you cannot represent us, please resign tonight. And if you do not resign tonight and you vote for this, we will find other ways to remove you from the council. That's our legal right, and we will do it. One last note before my time expires. I want to congratulate all of you. You've made a distinction. You're the first city in California, you don't know this yet, to make national news with this. If you check Breitbart.com, nice article. So congratulations. By bringing this to a vote, and implying that we're a racist city in violation of the laws, you've just made national news. And not just Breitbart, but the senior editor of Breitbart, Joel Pollack, who was out here talking to Linda Gonzalez and all the other citizens of Oceanside. And you're now on the spotlight. He's just waiting for the final vote, and he'll make sure that the nation knows what Oceanside's doing. You guys are being watched, so good luck.
Good evening, Mayor Wood, City Council. My name is Susan Custer. I've lived in Oceanside for over 35 years. At this time, all citizens of Oceanside get to vote 100% for City Council, 2 votes every 2 years, for a total of 4 votes every 4 years. Districting would deny 75% of our vote by allowing each voter only 1 vote every 4 years. I'm opposed to districting. I believe it would disenfranchise the citizens of Oceanside. It is the responsibility of the City Council to protect the vote of all of its citizens. That's why you've been elected. So please don't vote for this. I couldn't think of a good way to say that. Anyway, and thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Joan Perro. I'm very upset tonight as to everything that has come out. And when I came in, I didn't think I'd feel so pressured because I felt like you already set up everything, that we had no voice. And from listening to all the people that have gotten up here, God bless you, because you want the freedom, you want the vote, you want to stand up and not be threatened by people who think that we're a group of people in Oceanside that want separation. We are a loving community. We have people from all races here. We treat each other with much respect, and we don't want our voice, our vote taken away from us. This idea that I can vote for 1 council member every 4 years is ridiculous. We feel you have to stand up for us, because we're trying to stand up now to let you know how strongly we feel that we have a beautiful city here, we have a beautiful country, but too many people are fighting and looking for separation and not cooperating to make this country as wonderful as it could be. Let's not let our freedom diminish. Thank you.
Well, I guess I'm always the oddball. I want to welcome Ms. McDonald for coming here to help us try and organize this unbelievable mess that's been created with doubt and fear. There's a lot of fear here, I'm not afraid of anything, John will tell you that. I've already apologized to him once today, and I'm not going to do it again. But thank you for coming to help us straighten this mess out with these. The people are really afraid of being disenfranchised, and that's not what it really is about at all. I agree with districts. 129 years on July 3rd, the city has been organized. 129 years. 129 years of governing the same way every time, every year, all these years. I would really like to see a change and see how it works. If it doesn't work well, maybe we can change it back the other way later on. But right now, I think a change is in order. A change would be in order here. Every 2 years, it recycles, and it's a good idea. And I'm going to leave before they start throwing rocks at me. Thanks.
Our next 4 speakers are Juliet Cunningham, Leroy Gomez, Phil Feeney, and Dwayne Siegman. Juliet Cunningham, Leroy Gomez, Dwayne Sigmund, or Phil Feeney.
Good evening. My name is Philip Feeney. I live in Oceanside for 11 years. I'm a transplant from Boston, so if you don't understand my accent, I understand. Now, I live in Oceana. It's a nice community. I love it. In fact, I love Oceanside. And, you know, I think very much that Esther Sanchez is a fighter, and I like a fighter. But you know what? I won't be able to vote for you because I doubt if my district will include you. And I'm serious. I am so serious that I'm going to explain to you people something that I wish you would know, but I'm going to tell it to you so you will know that our Constitution, the 15th Amendment, Section 1, reads as follows. I will read this. It's one sentence. The rights of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race or color. Now, I'm explaining to you that I can't vote for her because of race. That is wrong. It will never stand the test of time. And don't tell me that the state of California law is constitutional on voter rights. Don't tell me it is, because it has not been tested. Furthermore, we are wasting our money on this whole issue. I hope that I see a motion to withdraw this resolution tonight before we leave. Thank you.
My name is Leroy Gomez. I'm Hispanic, and I was born in New Mexico. My family traces their ancestry to New Mexico back to the late 1700s. In 1848, we all became citizens because you moved the border on us, but that's fine with me because I'm a proud American. Also, my uncles, my cousins, they've all served this country valiantly in the armed forces. And I've lived in California the last 52 years of my life, and I'm happy to, and I've had the pleasure of living in North County for 32 years, and happy to have owned a home in Oceanside for the last 20 years. And I feel like it's just one nice big community. I can go in various places. I meet friends. They're Hispanic, they're Asian, they're black, they're Hispanic. And I think we're going to lose that if you go through with this districting proposal, because it just kind of it creates this division. And I just all I can say is I'm against it, and I hope you would be too. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dwayne Sigmund, Honorable Mayor Woods, Honorable Council members, and honorable citizens of Oceanside. Hoorah! That's right. We are all citizens of America. And we've heard all the speakers already. We've got a pile of stuff that's shoved down our throats every day. And our citizens are here to stand behind you, council members and mayor, because we got a big fight coming ahead of us. There are so many laws and so many things that are shoved down their throats, and they have to dish it out to us because it comes from the state of California and from the United States. We need to fix that. We can't fix it by just rolling over. Okay, let's look at some history here. Did we quit when Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor? No. Did we quit when smallpox started invading the whole United States? We got doctors out there start researching. We didn't quit. We didn't throw in the towel and just roll over. Okay, so we have to stand and fight. We know that there's all kinds of clauses in there. Each of them all mentioned that there's parts in there that are not right. We don't have racism in our city here. So we need to stand and fight. So we just want to let you all know that we're behind you tonight, and wherever we need to stand and fight, we're going to be there. But don't roll over like the other cities did. Just because they gave in and throw in the towel doesn't mean we are, because we've got facts, we've got documentation. We just need to stand behind you, and you need to stand behind us and start this ball rolling so we can fix the state of California. Are we going to fix all of it? No, but we're going to fix Oceanside, and I got 23 seconds. Any questions for me? Okay, the other thing we need to do is we need to go home and pray, because all those things that happened in the United States in history, the Battle of the Bulge, Pearl Harbor, all that stuff, we didn't win those battles. The Battle of the Bulge, the Battle of Bladensburg, all those fights, the smallpox. We won that by praying to God and giving God the glory and the grace to win and take over. And thank you very much.
Is Juliet Cunningham still here? She left? Okay. We'll move on to our next four speakers: Madison Shockley, Dennis Cisneros, Rena Morocco, and Renee Carter.
Good evening, Council and Mayor Wood. My name is Madison Shockley, and I live in Oceanside. I'm here to support the resolution because it is the most democratic way to govern a community. Every study shows that the more local your government is, the more representative it is, and the more democratic it is. It guarantees that every part of the city has a voice and is represented at the City Council. It also gives access to the political life to every citizen in the city. It's very expensive to run a citywide campaign for City Council. And this current structure, while it may not have this particular history, certainly lends itself to the very real possibility that moneyed interests can concentrate on a few candidates and elect them in spite of the desires of the city at large. A district organization of the city allows the person that lives in a neighborhood to talk to their neighbors, to knock on every door in their district and get elected in spite of how much money another candidate might have from another part of town. You can't do that as effectively citywide at-large elections. So the democracy that this structure brings is its main reason for my commending it to you. The history of the United States is represented in the Federal Voting Rights Act, and the history of California is represented in the California Voting Rights Act. What I hear in this history recently of this lawsuit is this organization is suing cities to comply with the law. This is the law of the state of California. And so by your complying with the law in the state of California, I think you're doing your job. And it does not divide the city. We're still Oceanside, and we'll still be together, and you'll still be sitting around the horseshoe. Thank you.
Prior to beginning this, hold on one second. Prior to beginning, I'm going to make a comment. So just real quick reminder to the audience, we do have a decorum policy, so if we could try and allow every speaker, regardless of their position on the item, to be able to speak without interrupting them. Totally fine to raise signs and everything, but I just think we want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to voice their opinions. So that would be great. Thank you so much, and we'll continue on with Ms. Carter. Here you go.
Hi, Renee Carter. I'm a graduate from San Diego State. I'm one of 11 women who graduated in my major, and I certainly felt a minority. And when I hear that some race is being favored, I don't like it. And I feel that that is immediately unconstitutional. And we have a voice when it comes to talking about that, because that's federal. I know we're state, but if we can get to the federal level, then we can win. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rena Morocco. I'm from Vista, and we just went through this process. So I hear a lot of emotion, and I understand that change is hard. I wanted to present a couple of facts. Number one, 100% of all the court cases that have, the cities that have challenged this have lost. Now, you heard about one in San Diego, but I believe statewide it's 3. Does the attorney know? I think it's 3 overall. 100%. It's going to cost tens of millions of dollars to fight this. And I'm just wondering what people are willing to give up to fight this. Are you willing to give up your roads? Are you willing to give up senior programs? What are you willing to give up to fight this losing battle? And you will lose. Okay, so I think that's the gravity of the situation. The second thing I hear is that Oceanside is not racist and that the city council is not racist because we have Councilmember Sanchez on the council. Demographically speaking, according to Census 2010, the white, not Hispanic population of Oceanside comprises 48.4%. The Hispanic population comprises 35.9%, which means that if Oceanside were actually reflecting the demographic that is out there in the makeup of the city, there would be 2 Latino members on the city council instead of 1. So those are just the facts, and again, I urge the council to vote in favor of this proposition because the money that would be spent fighting it can go to a whole lot of much better uses. Thank you.
Is Dennis Cisneros still here? He left? Okay. Our next 4 speakers are Muriel Sanderson, Lisa Hamilton, Victor Roy, and Linda Breen.
Good evening. I'm Linda Breen. I'm a graduate of El Camino High School. 40 years ago next month, I was a member of the first graduating class of El Camino. And I'm speaking because I'm deeply concerned about representative government. And running for office has become increasingly more expensive, and our representatives have become less responsive. And that is the reason people at all levels of government are dissatisfied. And I'm not saying Oceanside's government is not great. But I would like there to be government at all levels, especially city government, where a regular person who is not wealthy, who is not corporate connected, and who does not have rich friends can run for office and possibly win by meeting their neighbors, talking about neighborhood issues, and winning on the basis that they're going to represent the interests of the people who live near them. I think representative democracy is one of the foundations of our country, and it is very important. And furthermore, I would like to second what Rena said about fiscal conservatism. If you want to spend $3, $4, $5 million in a losing lawsuit, I think the city attorney has given very good advice, and it would not be fiscally prudent to fight a losing battle. I would like to congratulate your demographer. I cannot imagine anyone hearing her presentation and thinking that the process will not be even-handed. And I certainly hope that if the process goes forward, it will go forward exactly as she's discussed, because I think it's a wonderful process, and I can't imagine why that needs to be divisive on racial lines. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Muriel Sanderson. I'm a resident of Oceanside. Thank you, City Council, for your service. Mayor, thank you for your presentations from the County Attorney and the demographer. Very interesting, enlightening, a lot of work, I'm sure, went into it. I speak on the voice of not supporting this resolution. My community of interest is the city of Oceanside as a whole, as a unified entity. I think we've learned a lot of lessons through segregation and integration, thinking back historically, and one thing we have learned is that separate is not equal. And separating districts, separating people, separating interests is just likely to breed a lot of competition and into the board matters that come before the council, a lot more divisiveness rather than cohesiveness. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Lisa Hamilton, 323 South Ditmar in Oceanside. I'm holding this sign because it's the way I really feel. However, given the fact that other cities have tried to fight this and not a single one has won their suits, I urge everybody to get with the program and attend the workshops. There are 5 workshops that are all in May. They are on Saturdays and at night. Everybody can attend these workshops. These are the workshops that will help to determine the boundaries for the districts. The city is being driven to this position financially. I understand it. It's not what I like. I've worked on Esther Sanchez campaigns for the last 3 campaigns. However, this is the direction we're going, and everybody should participate in the process to the full extent possible. And that's by attending at least one, if possible more than one, workshop so that you understand the process and become a part of it. Thank you.
Victor Roy, Rancho San Luis Rey. My question, Honorable Mayor, City Council, staff, all the viewers at home that are paying attention to this very historic issue in front of us. My question goes to John Mullen, our city attorney. You presented that Palmdale, Modesto failed to win their cases, spent millions of dollars. You're our legal eagle. Is there no light at the end of the tunnel to save Oceanside or any of our cities that are being challenged by this issue legally? All right, onward. Folks at home, everybody here, are you willing to pitch in $10, $20, $50,000 a piece to fight this case? That's what it's going to take, because it's millions of dollars, but we have to know that we can win. Who is going to win? And John, again to you, what law firm do we need to have to win this case? All right, now moving forward, you know, we have to have community support if we go ahead with this process. So the city needs to hold community-wide workshops in order to gather neighborhoods' input, which in turn should directly contribute best ways to delineate the boundaries of districts to be drawn. And it is important to draw district boundaries fairly, which respects neighborhoods and does not divide communities with commonalities. Thank you.
Our next 4 speakers are Noel Breen, Mark, I think it's Dorius or Dorcas, I'm so sorry, I can't pronounce, I apologize, and then Thomas Dennert and CM Rocco.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The reason I'm here is in support of the resolution from a basis of common sense. 3 communities have gone to the well fighting this, and they've gotten their butts kicked. And millions of dollars have been spent chasing a cause that isn't going to win. There's millions of dollars that could be spent better in this community taking care of people that need some help, whether it's your seniors, whether it's providing better housing opportunities for folks here, and taking care of real human needs. I don't like the way this came about. I don't like at-large. I prefer at-large elections. If I were king, that's how we would do things. But we are a nation of laws. We are not a nation of men. We are not a nation of our private opinions or prejudices. Something happened a few months ago. There was an election, and the result was something that was really repugnant to me. From the top of my heart to the bottom of my soul, I hated what happened last November. But you know what? As an American citizen, I accepted the result and I accepted the rule of law. There's a saying that's called, the law is hard, but it's the law. Unfortunately, in this case, it's the law. There is no negotiating with it. It has been proven in court. These cases on the federal level have been going back since I was a little kid in Buffalo and people were worried about busing. I wish that it didn't come about this way. I don't even like districted elections, but it is the law and we should comply with it. Thank you.
Mayor, Council, Cindy Rocco. I ran for mayor last year against all odds, against Mayor Wood, the incumbent. I had $1,600, I had black and white signs, but I ran with passion. And I actually, they say with districting that I would have a greater chance to win, but I don't want to win that way. I want to win on merit and win the hearts of the entire population. I want to be able to run next year and not have that equal opportunity for that employment to be taken away from me. I don't want my vote to be diluted. I don't want to vote once every 4 years for somebody. I think that it actually dilutes even the, it dilutes everyone's vote, not even the polar minority. I know at this point that, we're facing this lawsuit, and I think if there is discrimination that's happening in our city, then maybe take the heed in the letter to take the opportunity to step back and say, are we discriminating in any fashion? And it's just to do a self-assessment. I'm not saying, because I'm not an expert. But let's just say if we did go to districting, I would want it to be where designed, if you did districts, you did populations, anybody could run, you would run every 2 years, and you would have to win a certain threshold within each district. So somehow coming out where if we can, somehow in this letter, it does say that we can come up with, we don't have to exactly do what everybody else is doing, even though I know that we would likely win, but we can come up with a modified response to this. We don't automatically have to do a knee-jerk reaction and dilute what is existing here. I don't want to be voting for one person every 4 years. I want to run for candidacy, and I want an equal opportunity to be able to do that, and I'm willing to take the punches. I think the only thing that makes an equal playing field is to reduce campaign contributions.
Mayor Wood, council members, I've lived in Oceanside about 27 years, and if my recollection is right, this is the fourth time I've been able to address the council. The first 3 times, 2 of those, a representative from Esther Sanchez's office contacted me. That endeared me to her, and I've supported her since then. I would hate to think that I can't support her in the future. Maybe send her some money, but not with my vote. But if I can't vote for her, am I disenfranchised? Sounds like it to me. Yes. Also, and I appreciate your demographics, and I know whatever you do will be fair, but if in that demographics you have the people near the airport, near where I live, in one location, and we don't like the expansion and the noise, we have one vote. People in South O really don't care about the noise abatement. And so their representative, boy, who's that guy over there? We don't care about him. Now, I know we're supposed to not do that. But when you have your constituents and your constituents only to be concerned about to get reelected, that's pretty much the way it happens. I don't like the threat of the lawsuit at all. But at one time, Dred Scott was the law of the land. Brown versus Board of Education was the law of the land. Separate and equal? Doesn't work. Maybe if we stand up, maybe if we draw the line in the sand, as they say, it might make a difference and other people might join us.
Is Mark I think it's Mark Dorius still here? No? Okay, we're going to move on to Diane Hansen. Then people who don't have training forms.
My name's Diane Hansen. I've lived in Oceanside for 23 years. I'm against this, but I know Oceanside City does not have $10 million to fight this. I'm trying to accept it. It's not easy. That's all.
Thank you. So this is a public hearing item. Any members of the public who have not spoke yet and who did not turn in forms are able to speak at this time. You can line up at the podiums. You have 2 minutes each. So anyone who has not yet spoken or turned in a form is welcome to speak at this time.
Hello, good evening. My name is Karen Plasencia, and I am here to urge the City Council to vote to support this measure and move forward with it. I know that everybody here wants to make this about race and talk about how Oceanside is not racist. To me, it's not about race, but I recognize that a lot of times, depending on your race, the interests of your community are different. I'm not here because I'm Latina, because I don't consider myself Latina. I am Mexican and also American, because I know people want to come up here and give history lessons and geography lesson for everybody. Is America is a continent, it's not a country. So everybody up and down the continent is American, not just everybody here. And also somebody said how Brown versus the Board of Education was the law of the land. Actually, it is the law. It's a new law. So maybe you should learn what you're saying before you say it. Again, so I definitely do think that it would be more democratic for people in your community to be able to vote and elect who is going to represent you. And if everybody wants to support Esther Sanchez, you should be very confident that her community knows where she stands and she would still be elected. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lily Sanchez. I am a resident of Oceanside and a member of the Human Rights Council of Oceanside, and I strongly support district elections, as these will strengthen the democratic process by giving the people the power to elect the right candidates that will represent us, not the candidates with the most money who represent their largest donors. The current policy is harmonious only for white people. Do not give in to the side who believe that Breitbart News is actual news.
One moment. Just a quick reminder. I know that we have different views on this. I've paused your time. But we do have a decorum policy, so if we could please do our best to adhere to that and let every person have the equal opportunity to speak that without interruption, I would appreciate that. Thank you so much. Continue on.
Well, the time has paused. Could we please also get maybe the heater on? Because it's really cold in here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Alrighty. So the current policy is only harmonious for whites. Do not give in to the side who believe that Breitbart News is actual news and who believe that it gives their cause legitimacy. For those who think you cannot vote for Councilmember Esther Sanchez just because you're white, I urge you to please look into the proposal more carefully, because that is not the way it works. Please avoid a costly lawsuit and switch to by-district elections. My family and my community do not want to pay our tax dollars to fund a lost battle. The government of Oceanside can and will be improved. It's time to end racial discrimination. It's time for equal representation. Please do not be afraid of equality.
Hello, my name is Misael. First, I want to say something maybe we can all agree on, is turn up the heat a little bit. And I support districting because as a nation, we vote for the president. I don't know what everybody's complaining about. We vote as a president once every 4 years. And making this a local election where we have districts, we can have a bigger voice about who we choose, and the person that comes from our neighborhood can actually have more input on city council. And as is, the city council isn't represented by the populace of this city. Being 50% Latino and with an ever-increasing population, if you look at our school districts, there's more brown kids in the schools. Yeah, so why isn't it represented on city council? Why is that an issue? Everybody wants to be represented, but what about my representation? How come I'm not represented here?
Is this on? Yes. Well, I've listened to this, and I think we should find some way to compromise with this. You know, it is crazy to step back like we're doing. We're all Americans. I think we can work this out somehow without going through a lawsuit. I have other issues to be here tonight, and I'll be talking about that later. We're all here. We're all trying to get along. We all are Americans. Let's work that way. Let's not go backwards. There's got to be a way we can do this. I can see advantages to this, because if I want to run for office, hey, now I don't have to go through all of Oceanside. I think that's a wonderful thing. And I don't really know which way to go now. I came in here against this. I can see advantages in both ways. There's got to be common ground. And if we don't find it, we're going to lose our nation, and it'll start here, and it's actually started a long time ago. We're fighting each other. We're having race relations that are just crazy. It's insane. The Founding Fathers gave us the opportunity to live together, to be all Americans. Let's keep it that way.
Good evening. My name is Richard Fox, Honorable Mayor, City Council. Years ago, before the city was a charter city, I always thought that districting would be a really good way to go. When it became a charter city, I haven't seen any of the districting come about. Now it's being forced upon us, and I believe if we don't go forward with it, that it is going to cost us millions and millions of dollars that can be used for a lot of other things. We're always seem to be kind of short on our budget anyway. Also, it still takes 3 people to make the decision. So if you have 1 in your pocket, you only have to go get 2 more instead of right now trying to convince 3 people. I don't know if you've ever been through that process at all. Also, this thing, it reminds me of how all of these handicap spots and all these handicap restrooms got forced upon small businesses because there was somebody going around doing this same exact thing and suing the businesses, and they had to conform to it because they could not afford to fight it. And I don't think we can afford to fight this battle either. Thank you.
Mayor Wood, I believe there are no more speakers on this item. Correct? Okay, no more speakers on this item. Your microphone, Mayor Wood.
Bring it back to the council. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to speak first because I'll explain this. This proposition that we have, or lawsuit, doesn't phase the position of mayor. It'll still be citywide. So I have a position that's more interesting than the rest of the council members. When I first got the copy of the lawsuit that was filed against us through our city attorney, all I said was, well, we need to go to the public and let them make a decision and vote on it. I was told we can't because of time limits. That means it does disenfranchise us and you in a roundabout way. We have to do it their way or else. I'm not happy about that, okay, but I listened to my city attorney and staff about this litigation. Understanding that if we go and fight it and lose, and you're going to have to be involved, you go in and lose it, we're talking about potential losing millions of dollars, like some speakers said, in the city of Oceanside. As the mayor, I'm concerned about losing money for you too, as much as I'm concerned about this issue. So I have 2 things to battle out here. It really doesn't faze me about the outcome, but it phases you either way. You don't want this passed, but it passes, or we get in a lawsuit and lose a lot of money. I don't know what to do about that, but it's frustrating. I feel like I'm intimidated to vote for it to save the city money. That's my first thought, saving the city's money. However, I'm certainly mad about the way this came about, and that we can't go to you, the public, and say, vote on it. You know, I should make a decision for the whole city, what's going on. And then we sat back and talked about it for a while, and I said, well, it's cheaper to run districting. You can, a little certain area, some people will run and potentially have better chance of winning. But I looked at it and said, well, like you said, you're voting for one person in one district. The other 3 won't be voting for that person. They're on the council. It really is the people of Oceanside voting for one person that's not in their district. And in fact, other issues came up. We got things like right now, we have a big issue about a $19 million pool out El Corazon. Can you imagine when we split up in district, the people don't get that district, get the $19 million pool. Right. The other three are going to say, well, we don't want it. We didn't get it. I see some real problems. But you've all seen it. You've all discussed about it. And I don't know what to say. But I'm more bothered about how it came about and it's being forced down our throats. I'm most upset about that. I'm sure everybody here will have their reasons about it. It'll be cheaper to run for council, but if you run for mayor, it still costs you the whole city. One way or the other, somebody's going to have to pay. But anyhow, the minority aspect in Oceanside, I agree. I don't think we've been, well, I got to watch what I say. I don't think we've been against the minorities in the area. Former mayor's here. He was on the council. He was a mayor. Esther's been for 16 years out here. We've had Lucy Chavez, Rocky Chavez. That's my opinion. We've been fair about it. But this lawsuit doesn't allow us to be fair. Just do it. I have a lot of concerns about it in the future if we have districting and how they will cooperate. We have a thing, goals in Oceanside. I think that'll go out the window because 3 of the 4 or whatever may not agree with the goals. So we have a situation here that's going to have to be resolved. I really wish that they would allow us to go to the public and say, do you want it or not? 5 of us up here shouldn't be the choice. Tell the citizens of Oceanside what you should do. So I'm bothered by this a lot. I know California's been a real stickler on their side about how they go. This is the last time I'm going to run. I'm very popular, and I got 64% of the vote, run against a lot of people, but I'm to the point I want to get out of this because it's finally got over my head. It's too strange, and I don't like it anymore. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's my spiel. We'll go to the council, get the feedback, and we'll go wherever we go. Anyhow, thank you for all your comments. I really do appreciate them, one side or the other. But let's go with this. Ms. Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I love this city. When I was growing up in the 60s, 70s, Oceanside was about 30, 40,000 people. And we had base housing within Oceanside. In fact, I'm from East Side, so it was in my neighborhood. So in my neighborhood, we had parents, mostly the moms, were from all over the world because our military guys would fall in love with someone and say, you know what, I want to bring you back to this country, my America. So I had the privilege, I think, and the beauty of growing up with kids that were Samoan, Japanese, African American, Latinos from different parts of Latin America. I had the privilege of really getting to learn about the culture and the richness that they brought to Oceanside. This is something that is so very, very special about Oceanside because of Camp Pendleton. Now, of course, we're now at maybe 176,000. We're using the 2010 census data, but we're still so very, very diverse. In fact, according to the Department of Finance, we're 51% diverse, 51%. And you see it. You see it in the restaurants that we have, and the celebrations that we have, and it's all very, very beautiful. The thing that I don't see, though, is these same people being able to run and win a race, a seat on the council. We all are Americans. My dad came to Oceanside in the 30s. Very, very rich place here. He came from Texas. I think the border kind of just, changed while he was there. My mom came from Mexico, so I'm the daughter of an immigrant. What I think about Oceanside, I think, I'm really, really, really lucky, because when I ran in 2000, there were 3 open seats. 3. The mayor seat was open, the 2 council seats were open, the council incumbents decided to all run for mayor. I won against 14 other people. 14. So 15 candidates, and I won. And I have been working for all of Oceanside. I hardly ever take a break. I actually was a public defender at the same time for 2 terms. I love this community, and that's why I do what I do. I love South O, I love Oceana, I love our mobile home parks, I love Fire Mountain. I have been there. But I just don't think that it's easy for anybody else. If you have the money, if you have over $100,000, you might be able to beat an incumbent. You might. I've seen the races where people spend over $100,000, and they are unable to do it. What do I think that is having that problem? And I believe in neighborhoods. It's not what's before us here is not, you don't like the way it's come, but for me, it's about neighborhoods. It's about doing the right things. It's about having a balance. It's about talking to each other here on the dais about things that really matter in the city. And I don't get that sense a lot of times. I know you've heard me over the years. You know my rap, right? So I'm not gonna go into that. I do believe that district elections will bring us more democracy to our elections. I do believe that our neighborhoods will finally be better represented. So while I wish that we could have not had a letter come to us and then have to respond to that, I would have preferred that we talk about this, talk about the very big pros about doing this. California is on districts. Can you imagine if the assembly was, the top vote getters? That would be all LA and San Francisco. San Diego probably would be left out, okay? If U.S. government, we have districts, we have congressional districts. If it was only based on who had the highest number, then I bet that Oceanside would never, ever be represented. Because who would care about Oceanside? District elections, that is to say, elections that are for the people and by the people, is one of the foundations of our Constitution. It is the basic foundation that we will be heard. We may not always get what we want, but we will be heard. And so I appreciate very much that you're concerned that somehow, at large seems to give you more. I think it's sounds like you might get more because you're thinking, oh wow, I get 5 people, not just 2. When I say 2, I mean the mayor and your representative. Well, how many times have I seen neighborhoods come forward and say, we'd like you to tweak this project. Earlier, well, we'd like for you to tweak this project and actually, maybe 1 or 2 houses down, and then this will fit. This will be something that we can all celebrate. no, it gets extended, and by the time it comes to the council, well, it's very difficult to turn a project down, let me tell you. So I'm going to move that we adopt the resolutions. I invite everyone in the city to please come to one of these meetings, because I want, by this and through this action, I want to empower our neighborhoods. I want to empower our Osiders so that we will have better government. You know, I'm on the tail end too, along with the mayor. You know, it's very likely that I'll be moving on, and I don't know who's going to be replacing me. I will still work with all of these neighborhoods because I care. I want to be able to do the best decision making. So if I'm not from, I don't know, Ocean Hills, if I'm not in that district, I still want to know what's going on. I still want to do the best for the citizens of Oceanside. We have so much potential for being the most sustainable, environmentally great city in this whole area, in the whole state. That's my dream for our generations to come. So I so move adoption. Thank you.
I second the motion.
Motion and a second. Anybody else to speak or you want to vote? Mr. Feller.
Thank you. I think one thing I think about district or this type of voting is it's even more of a let's make a deal kind of voting than we probably will. I'm sure there will be a lot of Brown Act violations going forward with it. I'm pretty disgusted with the money chasing extortionist. And we may not be sued. You know, I think we can win. We are, please, I didn't scream in your talks, please. We are not racial polarizing. This city, you know, I moved to this city in the end of '87 the second time, right into the middle of some really tough territory, and I was listening to the gentleman earlier that talked about gangs. Well, my daughters married every nationality. A young black man, Samoan, part Filipino, and so you know, I don't even see what you're referring to when you say racial anymore. You know, I know there's been that way. It's been that way in the past, but Oceanside is a city. I think this the whole city lives together in peace pretty well. This is, and I've lived in 4 parts of this city. I probably have, I know I have grandchildren older than some of you, and so and they're all doing very well. Political PACs can get you elected no matter whether you're in a district voting. It just works that way. In one sentence, we had a completely wrong statement in the letter that was sent, given the historical lack of Latino representation in this city. I think that's right in the letter, and I'm thinking, they must not have even looked at the city of Oceanside before they sent this letter. I'm just, I'm very, I think I'm very disgusted with the idea that this is being forced on us. I think maybe I think in a large city, in a state or a county where you have to represent 150, 200,000 people, or in many cases 400,000 or 500,000 or 1 million, I think that has a place. That's the only way you could actually run government, and so I believe that's probably okay in that instance, but not in a city like Oceanside. I do have a question. Are you going to be able to tell how many voters are in each district?
We could make that assessment later. Yes, we could evaluate those districts.
I think that's going to be interesting in itself, because the 41,000 people you're talking about are, there's probably 25 or 30,000 kids in this city, at least. So that's one district all by itself. Maybe some of the young kids could get elected. I'm not going to go along to get along. This is wrong as far as I'm concerned. From the very beginning of this country and its Constitution. So I think this is being forced to do something like this has no purpose. I would welcome the opportunity to send this to the people of Oceanside. But I just cannot support this, and if it passes, it passes. But I'm not going to be in favor of it.
Thank you, Mr. Kern. We got 10 o'clock. We shut down. So I want to try to finish other items on the agenda. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. I agree with everybody in this room that says no districting. I've talked about against districting for years. But the deck was stacked against us before we even walked into this room. When they changed the California Voting Rights Act by the legislature, then this was going to happen. It's been coming. We've talked about it for years upstairs about what's going to happen to us. A few years ago, there was an article in the Union Tribune about who the most conservative politician in San Diego County was, and I was that guy. But the idea, one of my responsibilities up here is to look out for the city and the fiduciary responsibility of the city. The idea that no city has won this. And the one that I look at the most is Palmdale. Palmdale is a charter city. And in the state constitution, it says charter cities have the right to run their own elections. But it doesn't trump the California Voting Rights Act. They have set the threshold so low that it doesn't take much to prove your case to win. So I am very concerned. I agree with Jack that the idea to fight this, but the idea that I would rather have beachfront improvements than give money to a bunch of attorneys. I would rather have Jack's swimming pool that he wants instead of funding some outside attorneys. But if we go forward and lose, we don't get those things. All these are general fund dollars. So those potholes that we want to get fixed, those things that we want to get done around the city, all that money's going out of town. I don't see a win in it for us. I understand what you guys want, and I've been with you all the time. But at the bottom line is, I have to protect the assets of the city. So I'm going to support this, even though I don't want to, and I'm sure I'm going to hear from all of you probably tomorrow or the next day. But the idea is that we really need to get involved with this. Don't walk away tonight and leave it here. You have that schedule. Be engaged, stay engaged, and see what we can do to control this. Because if we lose, and I think the city attorney pointed this out, if we lose this case, we lose all control. The districts would be drawn by a judge someplace, that probably down in San Diego or up in LA or even up in San Francisco, where the district courts or the appellate courts are. And so, we need to think long term here, because this is coming. No city has won against this. And I understand, and I see the thumbs down, and I understand people waving and things like that. But at the bottom line is, I'm going to protect the assets of the city, and we're going to move forward. So I know it's not the most popular thing right now, but I have a responsibility to the whole city. Thank you.
That's it. Okay. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. There was a motion and a second on the floor. Let's vote on it.
Motion approved, 3-2, Woodfeller, no.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Esther, we got time left. Ladies and gentlemen, we still have items, so if you can move outside if you want to talk, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Item number 20, please.
Yes, item number 20 is request by Councilmember Sanchez to set a council workshop to discuss district elections, campaign contribution limits, and term limits. Direction to staff. This item was continued from April 19th, 2017.
Thank you. I'll just wait 1 minute. Okay, I'll just go ahead and start then. This past election.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got a speaker up here. We're still doing business. Move them out. Thank you.
This past election, a couple of issues came up that had to do with term limits and contribution limits. And so I checked to see if we had, because my memory was that we had not talked about these two subjects since about 2001. And so I was able to check, and that, in fact, that's true. In terms of term limits, we do have several cities in the county that have term limits, Chula Vista, and these are cities about our size. Of course, San Diego does, but San Marcos has term limits, Chula Vista has term limits. In terms of campaign contribution limits, we've got Chula Vista, Escondido, San Diego, San Marcos, and Vista. I believe that it's time that we had a discussion about this. Again, 2001 was 16 years ago. And I think that if we were to have district elections, it might actually help in terms of being able to run, without having to have, raise $100,000 or more. But definitely, it does seem to be the trend to have term limits and contribution limits. So I'd like to hear from the public, if there's any members of the public.
Yes.
Before we go forward with this, I'd like to see a motion and a second to see if there's any support from this in the council before we hear from anybody. So if you want to make your motion and get a second, and if there's something and the council wants to discuss it, let's go forward.
So in other words, you don't want to hear from the public before
the motion and a second, and then we can hear from the public. If you get a second to your motion, then we can move forward.
Is that's subject to the direction of the chair, so that has to be...
Yeah, that's why I appeal to the mayor.
Well, I'll get a second. I get a second motion on this?
No, there is not a motion or a second yet. What Councilmember Kern is asking is he's requesting that we would...
I'm saying, I'll agree with, he's got a second on this.
Okay.
It's 10 o'clock soon, we're going to quit, so we
It's
got a
actually
second
20
on-
till 10.
Yeah, if we have a second?
So, first of all, I have to
Right,
make a motion.
secondly.
Let me make the motion. All right?
We should brief Deputy Mayor Lowry since you just stepped out. So Deputy Mayor Lowry, okay, you know what's going on? Okay, all right, sorry.
Okay, so my motion would be to set a workshop, a council workshop to discuss campaign contribution limits and term limits. I believe that it's time. It's been 16 years. I think that it's, many of us have served several terms, and certainly this seemed to be a big issue that came up during our last election. That's my motion.
Do we have a second? Lies, it fails for lack of second. Thank you very much.
So no, unfortunately, then there's no speakers on that item.
Yeah, they can
Oh,
speak.
they can still, okay, all right.
Yes.
Okay, all right. As long as the attorney says that's fine. All right, our four speakers that we have, Steve Hasty, Nathan Stinson, CM Rocco, and Rena Morocco. CM Rocco and Rena Morocco. Yeah, I got that confused. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, there you go.
Do we get back to our 3 minutes now, since there's only
3
four
minutes.
speakers? Awesome.
3 minutes.
Well, it's a pleasure to address you again, and I don't know if I don't get to address if people are leaving the room. But Esther, you had said earlier that you could spend $100,000 against an incumbent and still not win. So I think that is definitely proof positive that we need term limits. At the last election, both Esther and Jack both professed support for term limits, and I asked that you would honor that because those words came out of your mouth at the campaign.
We did say we would consider it, okay? And I am bringing it up.
Mayor Wood, you've said that you will not be running again, so I would ask you to give the citizens of Oceanside this as your legacy, that on your way out you've supported the opportunity for term limits. And Jerry, you've mentioned that you want to run for a higher office, and I would ask you also to support term limits on your way, since you're going to be going to a higher office, or hopefully. So I would ask you to consider this as a benefit to the Oceanside citizens to have term limits. And, when you have someone like Chuck Lowry who gets $75,000 from the firefighters union to win an election, how can an average citizen come along behind that and compete with that kind of money? So being that you guys just voted for districting, I think the term limits has to go hand in hand. And another analogy about the federal level of districting, just to take a step back for a second, those guys have to run for election every 2 years. So does that mean if we go to districting here in Oceanside, we're going to have all 4 city councilmen run every 2 years? I mean, that would be the model that's there. Lastly, I would suggest that the city of Oceanside look at the city of Santee. They had a great model that I think is even better than term limits. It's actually called term gaps. And what they do is, in their model, whether you're a mayor or city councilman, it's a 12-year term total, combined of whatever that is, and then you have a mandatory 4-year reprieve from office before you can run again. So that doesn't take away the opportunity to come back and serve the community again later. It just puts a 4-year gap, which gives another citizen a chance to step forward and fill that role. Because ultimately, without term limits, overcoming incumbency is near impossible. Even if you are competing against union money or $100,000, whatever it is, the advantage of an incumbent is just overwhelming. And I think that we proved that in several elections. So I would ask that we take a serious look. Bill Baber, I'm sure you guys all know, worked very hard in creating the legislation that passed in Santee. And I think that the idea of term gaps is actually a mediation between term limits, go away forever, versus just go away for 4 years, let someone else have a chance, and then if you still want to pursue public service, come back in 4 years. And I hope they will consider that. Thank you.
Mayor, Council. First of all, in the past, I would have said no term limits. Term limits because in the past election and experiences that it was almost 100. The same council has been here for however many years, and when something like that happens, you don't have. It becomes stagnant. There's not any new, fresh ideas and things coming in, and So when I ran, I thought, okay, definitely term limits, so there isn't that occurs. But it's kind of interesting because now, as most people are going to be leaving, now there's going to be a term limit imposed. And I believe, though, with the districting, if we go down that path the way it's designed, then it totally dilutes your ability to have any sort of policy influences, because you run once, you run another time, but if you have a diversity in candidates and you have people that really are stellar and stand out, why are you going to kill that opportunity for people to do that? I mean, so I think without diversity and competition, you do yield mediocrity. And it's not to be offensive, but that is what occurs. But I think that the biggest barrier is the campaign. That without money, you have to take away the huge money factors to level the playing field. You know, I mean, I went in there with most of my own money, $1,600, everyone said, why are you even wasting your time? I couldn't even afford the $1,000 to put it in the paragraph in. So I think if you did some sort of modifications and had caps on the contributions and did certain things like not having it be $1,000 for a paragraph in the voter book, because then you're at a disadvantage if you can't afford that to be able to distinguish yourself from people that you hadn't had a chance to speak to. Also, I do believe that it should be a low cap, approximately between even up to $5,000, and that it should be from individuals, and there should not be allowed any contributions from unions or developers or anything that would potentially be voted on by any council person or the mayor. I think that, I know it's not supposed to have influence, but I think the money just gets so huge in there, and it's a conflict of interest when you're voting on developments by developers where you've received money from that. And that, of course, puts like the person that's trying to run from heart and soul, definitely puts you at a disadvantage. And so I think that the playing field would be extremely much more level if you got rid of the super PACs and you really put a clamp on the amount of funds and the sources of those funds. Thank you. I hope that made sense.
We have Nathan Stinson, Lisa Hamilton, and Rena Morocco, 3 speakers.
Okay. I think the verbiage we are talking about term limits, we should change it to term gaps so we understand what we're talking about. The Founding Fathers did not put term limits in the Constitution. I've read extensively on what they debated about term limits. It was to circulate citizen legislators, statesmen, servants of the people, get into office, learn the office, learn how government works, get back out in the real world. Steve mentioned 4 years. It's something I'm thinking too. I'm thinking 12 years. I think from dog catcher up to not necessarily president, but to senator and congressman. 12 years in office, 4 years out before you can run again. No paid lobbying. If I want to run for office or if I want to lobby, I want to be able to do it personally, but no paid lobbying. If we want citizens to circulate throughout our government, then we need term gaps. We need people to circulate in and out of government, learn what it's like to be one of the governed also. If we keep people in, so many of you have been in here longer than 12 years, and you're all doing a great job, I imagine. I mean, but think about it. You've probably encountered it yourself, even now, in cities that have term limits. Politicians will not be affected. Professional politicians won't be term limited. Lobbyists won't be term limited, and the bureaucracy is not term limited. You are taking away the experience and the talent that people get. It's like having a sports team. You finally got your team together. Oh, you guys have been in too long. Out of here. Let's start over again. Let's keep the quality. We will always have bad politicians. We'll always have good politicians. And I think most people get in office to do the right thing, to serve their community and the generations to come. We don't have that anymore, and if we put term limits in and call it that way, we're done. Mexico has them.
Hello again. I want to thank Councilmember Sanchez for actually bringing this up and putting it on the agenda. It's a very important issue. I wish it had gone first before the last issue, because I think that it would be just as passionate. And I'd like to thank Steve Hasty for giving me a name for it, term gaps. I did not know, I've been saying this for decades, that term limits create what's called a lame duck. And if you are a lame duck, you can do all sorts of things that may not be the will of the people, but the will of perhaps your biggest donors, yourself, what have you. And I think that that's something that would be very important to guard against, that this idea of term gaps, which I love, would help guard against. My idea would be maybe 8 years on, 8 years out. So 8 years you can serve, then you sit out 8 years and do equal terms that way. The other is campaign contribution limits. I think that that's a very prudent idea. I think I think the majority of people would like to see that. More importantly, I'd like to see some sort of ordinance that anybody that donates to a candidate has to disclose disclose who the donors are from. No more of this dark money that can hide behind super PACs or what have you, but something like that. And that's my 2 cents. I think they're both good ideas. I think they're ideas whose time has come. And I think, Mayor Wood, this could be a wonderful legacy for you. Thank you.
Lisa Hamilton, 323 South Ditmar. I was under the impression that we were talking about a workshop. I hope we are, because I think this is something that the people of Oceanside need to participate in. I especially think that this is an important issue if we're going to go to district elections. So I hope that the council will vote to support Councilwoman Sanchez's motion for a workshop for both term limits and campaign contributions. Thank you.
No further public on this item.
I want to tell you the next meeting is, hold on a second, 17th, May 17th, Wednesday, 3:30 p.m. at this location. And I want to make one more announcement. Leanne Erickson, her father works for code enforcement. His name is Glenn Erickson. His daughter was attacked by a shark up at San Onofre, and she's in a induced coma from the severity of the injury. We'd like to say best of luck to her and bear prayers out for him. Thank you very much.